Hey, what's up, guys? It's Rico here, CEO of SourcePoint Asia, co-host of the Main China podcast, and the host of the SourcePoint Asia YouTube channel, of course. Back with
Another
another
one.
one, another podcast. This is a made in China podcast. We've been doing a lot of Discord podcasts. If you don't know, we have launched a Discord, or we are launching a Discord. Um, in this episode, I think the main topic we're going to start off with is about payments into China. We did a short form podcast for the Discord chat, but we wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper, and then we're just gonna shoot the shit, really. All right, cue intro.
Shooting the shit.
Did you see the screenshot that I mean the pictures I sent? It's like
No, I didn't check. I didn't see those.
in yeah, just check. You'll see.
Oh, I see the thumbnail from our last couple podcasts. What's that cartoon's name again?
Johnny Bravo.
Johnny Bravo.
The monkey with me.
Do the monkey with me. Come on. Hey there, baby. Oh, ow. Yeah, whatever.
It's just like I was watching that, but I was just like, oh shit, this he looks like Johnny Bravo, you know.
That's hilarious.
Got the
Can we put
black
that
shirt.
up while we're talking.
Of course, yeah. Got the black shirt and the hair and everything.
That's hilarious.
It's like I'm just gonna leave this here, just let you guys absorb this right now, you know. Listen, you likes to do the monkey, man.
Better than BoJack Horseman, I suppose.
Johnny Bravo is a classic cartoon, man.
He is.
That's a classic cartoon, and it was way too adult for my childhood sensibilities. When I hear some of the jokes now that I was listening to when I was like 8 years old, you know, he was talking. I mean, doing the monkey, that dance, that whole dance is a very sexual dance. Let's put it like that.
I'm gonna have to go back and check out Johnny Bravo. Do you remember how old when was this?
So that was on Cartoon Network. I watched Johnny Bravo probably between the ages of like 7 to like 11 years old. Oh, fun fact. Seth
First
MacFarlane.
episode, 1995, lasted
Yeah.
4 seasons.
4 seasons, but it was still on Cartoon Network, like in the late 90s. So I started watching, 7 years old I would have been, that would have been 1999. So I started watching it around that time period. And so fun fact, Seth MacFarlane, creative Family Guy, was one of the main writers and illustrators on Johnny Bravo. So that actually informs the humor a little bit. Like it makes sense to me now, like some of the adult humor that was there. Yeah. We like to have fun here at Source Manager. Jumping into the podcast and the topic. So yeah, payments into China. So yeah, on the Discord episode that we did, which was a shorter one, I think it was like less than 15 minutes, we kind of just were laying out a conversation that I had with one of our business partners. Well, I would say, would you call it business partners, or one of the companies that we work with, rather, that help us do payments into China. And it was kind of an insider conversation. He was like, I don't want to text about this. I don't want to email about this. Let's jump on a call. And I was like, all right. So if that's the case, then let's talk on Zoom, because let's not talk on WeChat. And he kind of just broke down to me what was going on in the current state of payments in China. It's actually been since we did that recording, that initial recording. It's been like what, like 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how it's been over the course of the last 2 weeks compared to that time. Have you still been experiencing delays?
No, it's significantly better. That's the reason why
Okay.
I was thinking about it. Like what he said was true. He said that give us like 2 weeks,
Mm.
maybe, and then I was estimating a month. Um, but yeah, I mean, the last couple of payments have been prompt and on time, so
But
that's been good.
overall, we've noticed that this has become an ever increasing problem and issue, longer delay times, more challenges to getting money into China.
Yeah, so we're not gonna like rehash the exact same sort of structure that we did in the Discord. In the Discord, I actually went sort of line by line in terms of, because I took a ton of notes from the call that I had with the guy, and I kind of, me and Mike and I went line by line and discussed each of the individual points. In this particular podcast, I think we just want to talk about more of our general perspective of payments and the overall climate and things like that. Not to be doom and gloom, but to make a long story short, essentially what he was telling me is that, there's been a lot of rules and regulation changes. Um, I mean, we've experienced it in the past couple of years. Even in Hong Kong itself, mainland China is taking more of a stronghold in Hong Kong, applying more of their policies in Hong Kong and stuff like that on the banking and business sector. They're trying to tighten up on tax evasion, which is like such a common thing with businesses in China. Um, I mean, businesses around the world, really. Nobody wants to pay taxes. So, but yeah, it's very prevalent in China, and so they're just kind of, and then of course there's a general aspect of China always wanting to control the currency exchange. So of course, because the U.S. gained some strength in the last couple of months, and then the Chinese yuan went down, that was a cause for concern for the Chinese government, and they wanted to restrict the flow of currency as they usually do to kind of control the pricing. So that's the sort of general overview. Besides that, I would say that there's maybe a little bit of an aspect of wanting to make it difficult for certain companies and weed out certain businesses from China.
We've seen
And
this going on since like 2017. I think we really noticed the start of that. Forget what the acronym is, but where they started requiring that they have like the U.S. government now has access to your Hong Kong accounts.
yeah,
Do you remember what that was?
yeah. I don't remember the acronym for it, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. And I
But we've
remember
seen
actually
it.
that time period was funny because it was like we were, we have these WeChat groups with foreign business owners and stuff, and there was like a whole, and not just foreign business owners, but just people working in China and stuff, expats, and there was a whole freak out, like, oh my god, by December 31st, 2017, if you haven't done X, Y, and Z, like you're gonna get in trouble with the Chinese government, or your bank account's gonna get shut down,
Which
something
is an
like that.
overreaction, but
Yeah,
overall things have
yeah,
steadily moved in that direction since
yeah,
that time period. I mean, when I first got to China, it was so easy to set up a corporation in Hong Kong and not have to deal much with any of the ramifications of doing business in China, right? Could just
yeah,
take money in Hong Kong, and it was pretty straightforward. Now that's considerably more difficult. I know that they did. It wasn't as quick as we thought it was, but they did close down a ton of the foreign created LLCs in Hong Kong, and I think that has only accelerated over the course of the last couple of years.
yeah. I mean, knock on wood, we've been lucky that they haven't. I mean, HSBC hasn't shut down our account or anything like that.
Well,
Yeah,
that's a little different
I
situation.
mean,
I mean,
we did
think of
get
all the
audited.
verification. Yeah, think of all the verification processes we've gone through, and we always file on time. We're so up to date on all of our licenses.
Yep.
you didn't have to be as proactive prior to 2017 and up until today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay, just another example is like this happened, I think, since our last podcast. No, it was before the last podcast that we did. But I mean, Guangzhou changed the regulations where if you're a foreign-owned WUFI, which is wholly foreign-owned entity, if the for lack of a better term, the CEO, the owner of the company is a foreigner, then they have to like go to the bureau and register some new document or whatever it was. And if they're not there, then it was like, all right, I have to like, it was like such a complicated process. It's like I had to send some documents somewhere and all this craziness. And they just came up with this. Like it was like what they just came up with it out of nowhere. And then we had to pay a bunch of money for this whole process to work. And it's like, man, like they're just like they're just trying to make it difficult for foreign-owned businesses. It's like, oh, you want to be registered here? Okay, jump through another loop. I already jumped through a bunch of loops for you guys. Like, no, not jump through another one.
We've been jumping.
Yeah, we've been out here jumping through loops, man. That's the new name of the podcast, jumping through loops.
What did in your conversation with this guy? What did he forecast for the future? What are they seeing as upcoming difficulties?
Well, yeah, we didn't want to make it doom and gloom, but like he's cautiously optimistic. I think his thing was like, and I think you have to look at like business in China like this in general, because if you look at sourcing, you look at many different aspects, things change, and then you have to learn how to work the system. I mean, we talked about this in webinars and stuff like that, right? Like with working with factories and stuff. So his idea was that, okay, right now maybe because his company is not as large as some of the other payment processing businesses, he doesn't have as much sway with the banks. Also, they lost about 40 to 50% of their business due to the pandemic. So they're not as attractive as a client for the banks. So the banks are not as willing to like help him deal with the regulatory issues. He was just like, they're moving to work with smaller banks and smaller territories, smaller provinces and cities, because those smaller territories don't necessarily get as much foreign exchange. So it's just adapting with the situation. It's kind of similar to the fact that when rental prices started to get higher in the big cities, what did the factories do? They started to shift out of the big cities. Yeah. There's like, it might be Guangzhou textile factory, but it's not really in Guangzhou. It's more in the outskirts of Guangzhou, or it's in an hour outside of Guangzhou.
Right. I mean, there's really no factories in the major cities anymore.
Very few.
You're right. And if it is, it's right on the fringe of the city or outside. You'll find some factories in Panyu, for example, but I wouldn't really consider Panyu a Guangzhou part of the Guangzhou city center.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not.
So yeah, it's pretty much just adaptation. But I think the main thing in terms of my assessment of that situation is you have to have diverse ways of paying into China. Actually, very funny thing is, TransferWise, now Wise, I don't know why they changed. Why did they change the name? TransferWise is a much better name. I don't know why did they do this. This is complicated now. It's like Wise. It's like, anyways, but Wise made an announcement yesterday that they are doing like multi-payment processing to China. So like if you want to pay into a Chinese account, you can now pay through either Union Pay, like a bank account, or WeChat or Alipay. Before you could only pay directly into a bank account, or I think you could pay through Alipay, but you can compare the rates. So basically it's like you could look and say, okay, it's going to be X percentage cheaper if I pay through Union Pay or whatever. And they said like you could save 50% on your payments into China. So I looking at that email, literally
It's a
that
lot.
email was yesterday, and I was like, oh, okay. So if Wise is able to do this, that means that, like, again, that's being cautiously optimistic. It's more about the sway of the company. Like Wise is a much bigger company than the payment processing company that we're talking about. That's based out of Hong Kong. Um, I think Wise is probably like a multi-billion-dollar company at this stage. So maybe Wise has more sway and is able to deal with the government in China a little bit better and get some deals. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know I've talked about this quite a bit, but I use World Remit for a lot of my smaller payments into China. It works as a charge against my credit card or whatever bank card I'm using. So it limits it to a certain amount. I think I can send up to like 1,500 US dollars at a time, but it's a similar situation to that. You can choose between sending to a Chinese Alipay account or sending direct to a Chinese bank account.
Yeah.
And it just works as a card transaction here, which I've found is quite convenient for these smaller payments. And, a lot of times we have these sample orders that we have to collect multiple products, multiple small payment products. It's a really big nuisance now that both of us can't enter into China. Before it's really easy for us to pay on our WeChats or our Alipay accounts. But do you have functioning WeChat Pay at this point?
Mm, I'm not 100% sure. I think I still do because
Really?
I checked, like, okay, so this is prior to when WeChat forced me to forced me to change my account from a mainland account to. So basically, right now there
Wow.
is WeChat and there's Weixin, right? So it's
Yeah, right. What do you
Yeah.
think that was because they recognized that you were outside of China at the time?
Yeah, because they recognize that I'm outside of China
Uh,
based off of geolocation, and then also I changed my phone number on the account to my Philippines number, but that's never been an issue in the past because when I was traveling, I would change my number to my Philippines number, my Zambia number, U.S. number, whatever. Like I would just change it
Yeah.
because I knew that if I need to receive like a text message or whatever, log into my WeChat,
Mhm.
then I had to have that on. But when I changed it the last time, uh, WeChat was like, "Oh, you're outside of the country. Okay, you got to have a mainland China number to use Weixin.
Yeah.
You have
Weixin
to."
is what Chinese people call WeChat. So
Yeah,
that's the Chinese name
mm,
for it. So that's what Rico's explaining by the two different accounts. If you set up your account in China, it's a Weixin account. If you're setting your
yeah,
WeChat account up outside of China, it's a
yeah,
WeChat account. WeChat account still functional, can still communicate just the same. It
yeah.
has some features, but far limited features compared to what you see on Weixin, which you can really only access if you're in China and you establish a Chinese bank account. You tie a Chinese bank account and a Chinese mobile phone to
Yeah.
that account. And that since you can't get in China anymore, that's starting to become almost
It's like, yeah,
impossible.
it's a catch 22. It's like, okay, you need to be in China to use this. I was like, but I can't go to China, or you need to be in China to verify this information with your bank account. But it's like I can't go there.
That's
Well,
how
too
that's how
too
my
bad.
account was. I mean, I functioned off my Weixin for
Mm,
forever. That was
yeah,
my life really for a long time. Did everything through that application. And then, yeah, at some point during the pandemic, I was no longer able to access my wallet. They put me through a bunch of verification information and I certainly entered it in correctly, excuse me, entered it in correctly, but still the end result was you have to come to a physical bank to get this all
yeah,
straightened out.
yeah. I was
And
like, too
then once you
bad, too
can't
bad, so
keep
sad.
once you can't keep your SIM card going for whatever reason, it's expensive to at least even keep it on. And
Yeah.
yeah, they shut us out.
So yeah, all this to say is like it's a slow squeeze of trying to push out, I guess, the foreigners from the country. Um,
Yeah, not
but at
just
this,
that, but they're their own, people that are domestic China too. Like they had to go through way more verification process, put all of their accounts,
Oh yeah, I mean,
through a link.
I can't even begin to imagine I mean, I remember my ex girlfriend uh, at the time when the pandemic hit, and she was just explaining to me about these like biometric passports, essentially, right? That I mean, let's call it what it is. Like nobody's gonna say that, but it's a biometric passport. You go and you want to get into your condo, your apartment area. You have to show on your WeChat, like scan the QR code. It shows who you are, your age, your health, your medical history, what was the last country you traveled to, and all this stuff.
That's what all the conspiracy theorists predicted, man.
And I was just like, when she told me that, she was saying it like kind of matter of fact, like, oh yeah, no, you just scan, and then I was like, man, well, we're in a George Orwell novel right now. Like, what is going on? Like, you guys are out here with the biometric passports? Like, I was like,
It's here, man. It's here.
that doesn't sound like fun to me. It doesn't sound like fun to me, man. Like, yeah, like just to get into my apartment uh, block, I'm having to like show you my medical history. Like that's what's
I
going on in these
mean,
streets.
then you throw in the COVID testing into all of this, and it gets even
Oh, the
more crazy.
mandatory. Oh man. Okay, so if you're watching this right now, you should have seen the Michael Michelini. If you haven't seen the Michael Michelini podcast that I did with him, go watch that podcast. Watch and listen to that podcast. He was telling me about this. He was like, he had to do a mandatory COVID test. Like it's like they have to do it every so often, right? And it's just one of those
Some
like they
people,
just
it's mandatory multiple times a day, depending on where you are.
yeah, depending on where you are and depending on what you're doing. So like in his situation, because his kids are going back to school, like physically going back to school, like he has to do it like every I don't know, so I think it's like once a month, like every 2 weeks or something like that. And he was just like, "Yeah, I got the mandatory COVID test today," and I was like, "I was like, oh my god!" Like he's there, like I have to go, and I was like, "Oh Jesus, man, this does not sound fun at all." Like, it does not sound like a good time.
Nope.
Uh, that's the world that we live in. All right, so okay, let's switch to a more positive perspective.
Yeah.
So okay, yes, a lot of things are fucked up right now, but the reality is, in terms of SFA, we've had two of the best years that we've had in the business ever. So, while it's weird that like we haven't been to China in the past 2+ years, from a sort of business and financial standpoint, things have been going up. So, I mean, what that says to me is that at the end of the day, as I've been saying, and you guys have heard me say multiple times in the podcast, is like China isn't going anywhere. It's going to be a long time before people actually shift away from China. And I think
Sure.
even having COVID happen is even probably even push that back further because let's say like Apple or Nike or whoever was like, oh, we're going to build a factory in Indonesia. Then COVID happens for a year and a half, 2 years, and people are not working, you know, quarantines and all this stuff. What does that do to your construction project? What does that do to like, you know what I mean?
It
The
just pushes
infrastructure that you're
everything
building.
back
Exactly.
exponentially.
Exactly. So, China's still going to be out here for a while. Um,
Just have to
so
be ready for whatever cards are dealt. You said that our 2 years have been quite good, but that wasn't without a lot of volatility and
yeah,
having to adjust to the times. And
yeah, we got
I think
lucky.
yeah, for sure. And I think we've talked about it on the podcast already, but our business was a little bit more catered to a smaller clients, startup companies who need assistive services with product development, help finding factories for the first time, working through design issues with those factories and getting their businesses off the ground. And while we certainly still are able to cater to some of those clients, it's been increasingly more difficult, and we've had to transition, to diving deeper into our mid to large size clientele's businesses a little bit more. They need a lot more help because they can't, do their spot visits, or their employee who is coming and spending significant time in China can't do that anymore. So
Mhm.
it's required transition, what you were talking about at the front of the podcast, but these challenges that you have to just kind of figure a way through them. It's the same thing for the evolution of our business over the last couple of years.
Yep. So I mean, it's not the end of the world when it comes to that. It's just more about adapting and adjusting to the times. Um, I guess I was trying. There was something that I thought about before that I wanted to say. Okay, I guess this would be more of a question for you, Mike. Like it would be. I mean, generally, I understand, and I think the world understands that there's a certain aspect of people blaming China for COVID, right? There's even before that, there was the issues with China and the US with the trade war and things like this. What is the what is the consensus? What is the vibe that you're feeling in the States right now?
That's
For
a tough
anybody that
question.
doesn't know that Mike is currently in Chicago.
I'm in Chicago. That's a tough question because, I this is my space. This is what we do. These are the conversations that we're having all the time. So I am in, you know, groups. I'm in different platforms where they're talking about these issues, and those issues are front and center. So I get a little bit more of the I guess you could say anti-China vibe from some of these platforms that I frequent and try to skim information off of. But if I'm not paying attention to these particular message boards, and I'm not involved in these groups, and I'm just out and about, I mean, overall people here don't care. They have their own issues, their own problems. You do see stories about it, in the media, some things that politicians are saying. But I've started to get more acclimated to living here, started to branch out, starting to form some strong relationships, starting to get a little bit more involved in business ventures out here than certainly than I was before. And I just don't sense a strong anti sentiment or big pull. I think we've seen a growing percentage, a slow growing percentage of people that ask us if we have the ability to source outside of China, and they don't want to source inside China. They would prefer to try a different location, or at least initially, before they, understand what it takes to source somewhere else. But overall, I think people are still business as usual, and the most important thing to them is, the operation of their business. And a lot of times that means cutting costs. And a lot of times that means, China already has the competitive advantage in that particular field. And yeah, I think the short answer to your question is I don't feel a huge shift. Obviously, things are more difficult. Because you can't get in out of China as you could before. But I don't sense a major shift, simply because I don't think there can be, as you said a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, another aspect is like just thinking about it. So maybe not the Apples or uh, Samsungs of this world, but like, the companies are selling on Amazon and have their own e-commerce stores that are doing millions. Like, if they don't have offices in China and they don't have staff in China, it's like all of a sudden you can't go there. You can't send, like you said, you can't send that guy, that executive that's going to oversee a production or something like that. And then at the same time, you're thinking like, oh, we want to start producing in other countries, but your production line has been going through China for years and years and years, and you have a system there. The factories that you work with, you understand all these things to develop. a new production line in a different country during the pandemic. I mean, it's fucking impossible. It's not even, it's not even a question. Like you have to, I,
Extremely difficult, maybe impossible, and that's
yeah,
just for the industries where there's even options in other
yeah,
places. For a lot
yeah,
of industries and a lot of stuff, there's not even a viable option to
yeah.
produce outside of China.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. I think it's tough. Um, so I think a lot of people kind of reconciling that, you're still gonna have to work with China. Like even some of the clients that we've spoken to recently, where they're talking about starting their production, like maybe their first production or so in the US or in Europe, and then they want to shift over to China because it's like it's just gonna be cheaper. They can, do things a little bit more efficiently, things like that, you know.
Well, one benefit I've seen over the last couple of years with our business is I feel like the pandemic, number one, and then um, also number two is we've noticed a lot fewer factories are willing to engage with us in product development. They're
Hmm.
just not interested. Something that, still has to work through the design, or it's going to take 3 to 6 months to get to the point where we're even considering an order. They don't want to even deal with it. So what I've noticed when to break down that, one thing that I think has been a pleasant surprise is a lot of the incompetent factories, or not all, but a great majority of the incompetent factories or factories that we're having issues with at some point or another have been weeded out. I feel like the people that we work with on a consistent basis are fantastic, and they've adjusted as well as we have to this new environment where there's very little face-to-face interaction, something that we heavily relied on before. And they've done a good job transitioning with us and being accommodating to whatever it is, Zoom meetings, or having to accept any format of something. That's been one of the pleasant things, I'd say, of this big change in our business flow, not just with payments, but all aspects of sourcing.
Okay, Mike, if you're a company that's in the low seven figures to high seven figures or even eight figures, but you don't have a physical presence in China. What I mean by that is you don't have an office and staff in China. Uh, how how are you managing your mass productions right now, considering everything, not just like from I can't go to the factory and do an inspection, or I can't go to Canton Fair, but also the shipping and the planning of productions and making sure you have enough inventory, all that stuff.
It's a nuanced question. It depends on the client and what their product is and what the operation is, what their current, where they're currently producing. All these things factor into my answer. But if you're not using somebody like us, if you're not using a sourcing agent, maybe you have a personal connection, someone you trust in China to kind of be the point person and handle things during the Chinese business day, or you just heavily relying on the factory, and then occasionally connecting with other companies to help that process through. So I would say, you're heavily relying on the factory to communicate all details and to manage production, but you're also having a third-party QC come in to check the products, verify quality, specs, all those things. And maybe with a really solid logistics company as well that's a little bit flexible. Yeah, I don't know, I'd be interested to ask some people who are in that position how they've transitioned. I imagine if they have a really good relationship with their factory and they spend a little bit more time trying to communicate with them during China business hours, that there'd be a potential to manage that. But I think it would be tough without having someone on the ground. I know that we couldn't do it, or maybe we could, but it would be so difficult if we didn't have our our staff and, people that we trust to put eyes on these things and handle them in real time.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, even though you might have a pre-existing relationship with the supplier, when things happen, they might not give you all the information, and a lot of times the transparency comes from you being able to physically go to the factory and see what's going on.
Yeah. And we've talked about that so many times. So maybe it's not even them trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Maybe it's just something, once you walk in there and you see the way things are flowing, we relied on that so much, man. Not that we were ever the point person with the factory and handling all the communication, but those face-to-face meetups, those check-ins were critical. And oftentimes,
well, I mean, we're still doing it,
yeah,
It's
of
just
course.
we're not the people actually going to the factory.
Right. So to answer your question, I think it'd be really tough if you didn't have someone that already in place that we could rely on heavily, because we haven't quite come up with a name yet for our Discord podcast. So on the Discord exclusives, we have been coming up with a raffle, a giveaway, right? So we're having our customers, our subscribers, to offer up quality names. We're going to tally a vote, and the person who gives us the winning recommended name is going to get a Z kit. What I'm rocking right here, and that's a product that my buddy and I started. He's a pro athletic trainer. It's a traveling physical training kit. Call it a prehab kit. It's got everything in there that you've already seen: the home workout tools, resistance bands, jump ropes, foam rollers, yoga balls, a wedge for you to work your feet and your calves and your knees, and all designed by a guy who works with pro athletes. But we're in the process of kind of relaunching and setting up a crowdfunding campaign this summer. So that's been that's something that's within the scope of what we do at SFA, but requires a kind of a different skill set as well. So that's something that has been keeping me busy and quite interested. We just shot a commercial, that we plan to split up into some ads, as well as a crowdfunding campaign video for the product, and we're going to relaunch this summer. So it's just something that's been on my radar. I've been working on a lot, and it's pretty exciting. And we hope to share the campaign and the free kits for the raffle winners with our community in the weeks and months to come.
Just to expand on the raffle side of things, it's more like whoever comes up with the name for the Discord chat will be getting a Z kit, and I think, well, maybe not necessarily Z kits every month, but like I think we'll be doing a monthly giveaway, some prizes within our Discord community. Discord, you can be in the community for free, but it will be limited. But we have paid tiers as well. We'll have the website link up. I'm sure it'll be like sourcemanager.com/discord, pretty much. So it's sourcemanager.com/discord. Going off of the aesthetic stuff, I was going to ask you, what is the state of wild ball in China right now?
It's dead, man. It's dead. I spend less and
like
less
completely
and less.
dead.
No, it's not completely dead. I'll see people playing. I'm not on WeChat Moments as much. I'm not having as many conversations as I was day to day. I'm almost having no basketball conversations anymore. Tears shed. But yeah, the games are few and far between. Not nearly as many games. You do see sometimes people posting games, tends to be a little more localized than it was before. I don't see the same familiar faces traveling all over to every province playing. So reduced amount of games, not as many big games where you'd have people from other provinces traveling to play. And certainly, every month it seems there's another foreigner that's not in China anymore. So, there was only a small group of guys, maybe a dozen or 2 dozen guys that weathered the storm and stayed out there throughout the whole pandemic. And,
Mhm.
from how it was looking and what I kind of heard is those guys were cleaning up. They were getting
That's what
all
I was about to ask. I was like, I mean, if
they're the
it's
only option for
yeah,
foreign assistance, for the to bring the ringer in. So I would see those same guys holding trophies in every other picture. But I know two people in particular have really, really benefited well. They both got CBA contracts. And this is absolutely no disrespect to them or their game. They're both excellent players, but I don't think that they would have had the opportunity to do that prior to COVID, just because, not because of their skill level, but because the CBA requires a certain kind of resume. They're looking for a certain type of name.
yeah.
That's probably primary concern, even more than how they play ball and how they acclimate to life in China and acclimate to Chinese basketball. So these guys, were quite good players, but they were in China more so on a wild ball tip, doing these promos and smaller money ball games, and they were able to twist it into getting a pro job with the top league. So, the guys who have weathered the storm and stayed out there, I know that they've done quite well, but not with a lot of uncertainty and challenges, just like we were talking before with our business.
So, do you think there's going to be a resurgence of wild ball eventually?
You know, there's about a half dozen times where I thought that the answer would be yes. I was having significant conversations with people. I was setting up guys to go back. We were working through the visa process, but I never made it to the finish line with any of them. The reason for that was because it took too long, too many ever-changing requirements. So we would get one thing done and it wouldn't be enough because there'd be a new set of requirements. Okay, we're gonna figure out how to get this guy into Shanghai. We found a direct flight that's not 30,000 US dollars. That's not a joke. And we're finally gonna get him in. He's got to do this 14-day quarantine. Okay, now it's not 14-day quarantine anymore. Now it's 28-day quarantine. Now they're requiring more documents than they were before. So it's tough, man. I mean, I know a guy who went through a lot to get back to China. I mean, a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of hoops. And
Yeah,
I think,
I mean, I had a business friend of ours. He went through a lot of shit, and he was
I
in
mean,
China for like 2 months, and he was just like he messaged me because I asked him, I was like, how did your trip go? He messaged me, he's like, don't go to China. That was the only. He didn't even expand. He didn't say. He was just like, don't go to China.
I mean, the guy I was just talking about before he said that, I mean, he had to quarantine in Canada. He had to quarantine. I mean, he probably did 40 to 50 days of quarantine
Jesus.
in
So,
total.
uh,
That's
but I mean, it's going to obviously relax over time, right? It's not going to be as extreme, I think. I don't.
perhaps
Using they're not going to keep a 28-day quarantine permanently. I don't think that's going to happen.
been 2.5 years, man. Like, I,
Well, yeah, no, I know that because there's been variants and all that stuff, but like, I mean, the way the world is moving, I think we are beginning to accept that this is just around. COVID is another, like a stronger form of the flu, and
you would think
you
that would
know,
be the general
maybe
consensus.
China might be a little bit slower to adapt to it. And not to get into the conspiracy theory side of things, but I have to say
Yeah.
this. Uh, I mean, maybe there's stuff going on in China that we don't know about, like in terms of
There's always stuff going on in
the
China we don't know
in terms
about.
of what I mean specifically is in terms of the amount of cases
Sure,
and
sure.
and
Yeah, that's always
how
always a possibility.
severe things are, because we just hear what the news media says and stuff, and obviously within the country information is restricted, so
Yeah.
there's always that possibility that it might be more greasy than we think, you know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, man. But unfortunately, I think that I don't think it'll ever be completely dead because Chinese people love basketball and they're going to keep playing basketball and there'll still be tournaments for sure. But definitely what I experienced and, what the guys I worked with experienced, I think that's dead. I think what we
Yeah.
were doing before is no longer.
Well, it
I
might
did think it was
adapt.
going to be a cash cow for, quite a few years to come, and there'd be a long time before it wasn't an option anymore, but that wasn't the case. It was fun while it lasted.
Well, I think it might evolve though. It might. I don't think it's good. Like you said, I don't think it's going away just because of
No,
the
basketball in
passion
China
for the game.
certainly
Yeah.
isn't dead. No,
Yeah.
but I mean, even before coronavirus hit, I was seeing things becoming oversaturated and changing, and the same type of opportunities that were available to me in 2015 and 16 were no longer available in 2018 and 19. So I agree with you. I think it'll evolve because they are absolutely basketball crazy, so basketball hungry. I think there's certainly going to be all kinds of basketball opportunities moving forward. How big or how many of those opportunities will be for foreigners, I think remains to be seen, but there's certainly be some. We got a news article that came up a couple days ago that the Shanghai Sharks are trying to pay Michael Beasley a 7-figure contract. They said, no, I think it was 8. Anyway, millions of dollars to come out and play in a condensed CBA season. So they're still getting big names out there for their top league. They're still negotiating some guys to get over to do promos. So I mean, there's going to be basketball stuff for you.
How like looking at the what's the Chinese Super League, is it CSL, Chinese Super League, the soccer league? Looking at the disaster of that, like okay, well, I guess generally, what are your thoughts around that, and then how do you connect that with the CBA? Obviously, basketball is more popular, but like the same companies that were investing in the soccer league and all this stuff and bringing in all these foreign famous players and promising them 8-figure contracts or 7-figure contracts, they're the same ones that own the basketball teams. And there's a lot of, I mean, companies that, I mean, there's a lot of teams that have folded in the soccer league.
Yeah, well, I would be actually, I've read a little bit about it, but it sounds like you might even know more than me about what's going on with the soccer league. Have they completely collapsed?
Not the entire league, but like for example, Guangzhou Evergrande.
Well,
I mean, we know what
that's a
happened with
particular
Evergrande in
case,
general,
yeah.
but like there's at least, I think there's like 3 or 4 teams that filed for bankruptcy. And it was like these are teams that were backed by multi-billion-dollar.
Yeah, but Evergrande is one of
Supposedly,
them, I'm assuming.
Evergrande is one of them. Yeah.
So I imagine if that happened in the CBA, that would send ripples throughout the league. If like the Beijing Ducks collapsed and we're no longer in operation, maybe the league would look a lot different. Certainly, if like the Guangdong team and the Shanghai team, if they were all experiencing this turmoil at the same time, the league would look completely different and maybe be in a similar situation than the soccer league is. So there's just a lot of uncertainty. A lot of uncertainty.
I think it's a fucking house of cards, and I think what happened was because all this stuff happened with the soccer league during COVID. So, and part of the bigger story with Guangzhou Evergrande. Did we ever talk about Evergrande on the podcast? Do you remember if we ever spoke?
I don't remember about the football team or the
not just the company
situation
and the situation.
I do think we had a conversation about it. I can't remember if it was on the podcast or not. Yeah.
Do you want to just give like a brief summary so that I can continue what I was talking about?
I don't know if I'd give the best summary. Here's my my attempt at it. Basically, they are a housing focused investment company, and the bubble burst. Yeah. I haven't read Evergrande for a couple months, but they defaulted on a massive amount of their loans. They're a major company that when the curtains were pulled back, it was determined that they were just, um, completely leveraged and putting massive amounts of money into these kind of dead end projects. And there's such a big corporation for them to not be to default on their loan payments was a massive situation. I mean, I've seen some estimates that like $65 billion,
Yeah,
some of the losses.
craziness.
But they're what, the largest or the second largest
That's it.
property developer.
Largest, number
Yeah,
one largest property development company, real
in
estate
in
development company in China.
in China. Yeah, and I
Right.
mean they're on the Fortune Global 500 company. So for them to start defaulting on their loans is a massive
And and
situation.
I mean, maybe they thought they were too big to fail. They were looking at, 2008, the U.S. government bailed all these companies, bailed out all these companies, and the Chinese government just refused because they were
Oh,
just like,
I'm sorry. I'm reading an
so,
article from last year that says liabilities exceed 300 billion. So
oh, Jesus
65 was
Christ, Jesus,
a bit
60. Oh
soft
no, that
there.
was conservative. That was very
Yeah,
conservative.
yeah.
65. No, I mean, like, $300 billion. Like, what the fuck? Like, yo, like, I can't even wrap my mind around that. I can't. Like, how do I can't imagine that? How do you end up in that situation? As a business, like, how do you? But then again, that's why I said I think it's a house of cards situation because
Maybe they took
you
the
talk
Bernie
about
Madoff rule
the
book
appro-
there, just built a giant Ponzi scheme.
well, okay, and not to. I guess we're gonna go off topic here, but like, it goes back to this whole Silicon. I was thinking about the Silicon Valley stuff. Like, I watched two series recently, which was the one about WeWork, We Crashed, and then the other one was about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. Um, I don't remember what the name of that TV show was. I watched the documentaries before, and I read like some books about that stuff. But what I'm learning about those sort of companies that get evaluated, like I think Elizabeth's, like Theranos was evaluated at like $11 billion at its height, but they were not making any money at all.
Mhm.
It was just like evaluation based off of speculation, based off of, oh, we have this IP and this is what the investors have put into the company, so therefore, this company is worth X amount of money. And it's the same thing with WeWork, which I think was evaluated at a much higher rate, and they were just burning cash and making not that much profit. And it's all this it's like this scheme of like, oh yeah, this company's worth billions and billions, but they're not actually making any money, right? And it's kind of like a game, or it's an illusion in some aspects. And I think that, like, in China, with some of these companies like an Evergrande, or let's say the Chinese soccer league, it's a similar thing where they're just like, oh yeah, we are Guangzhou Evergrande, we're the best team in China, like we have all this money and all this stuff, we're gonna pay this dude millions of dollars to come and play for us. But
But
it's
it's
all
just like
borrowed money. It's
it's all
all,
borrowed money, and it's
yeah,
like
it's all,
endless over
yeah,
expansion.
yeah. And then the moment that you get the bank saying, no, we're not going to give you any more money, they fucked. And that's basically what happened during COVID. Was the banks were like, you know what, like, we are losing a ton of money and it's COVID, and we need to start collecting our debts. So if
Yeah.
you guys can't pay back your debts right now, like, we are not going to give you another line of credit. It's not
Yeah,
happening.
and what I read about Evergrande, and I've seen with some other Chinese large corporations, is it's not so clear to understand their books. It's a
Yeah,
very
it's convoluted.
very convoluted, very murky to try to understand it. Super complex. So maybe it could have been noticed earlier. Maybe someone else who is, doing an audit would notice if it wasn't for the complexity of how they're set up and not having, all the information about the company's assets and liabilities. So I think I'm sure somebody was aware of it and speaking about it before it happened, but kind of seemed like it came out of nowhere.
Mhm.